All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining for this webinar on leveraging college and career indicator equity data to inform CTE goal setting and grant writing. It's a mouthful, but we know as we enter this grant season in 2022 that there is a lot that we need to do for both CTE incentive grant and for K12SWP. So regardless of which one you are applying for, these are helpful. And I think it's also something just to have in mind as you are building your goals in CTE at your district or anywhere around the CCI. We'll be digging into the CCI today and really being thoughtful about how we are investing these kinds of funds, how we're investing our LCAP, and find opportunities to support all students through this kind of work. So again, I will drop the link to this in the chat. Feel free to follow along. There's even like a worksheet so that you can join in on the fun as we go. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so I just want to remind everyone that workforce development is an equity movement. And so when we're working with our district, when we're working on grants, the concept that much of our students, the impact on their access to different programs or in their communities, the opportunity to ensure social and economic mobility so that our students may have the opportunity to make more money than their parents do, to move out of above the poverty line, and maybe even have opportunities for things like have enough money to go on vacation and have holidays off and have all of the benefits that we know should be, their right as a worker, but often aren't at the lower paid job. So the more we can do in CTE to empower students to make informed decisions about their future and explore all of their opportunities, the better we will see their lives going forward. And so as we think about workforce development as an equity movement, it's really important then that we're focused on special pops or special populations. And so as we get into that, special populations is the overarching term defined in Perkins 5. So that's our federal funding around CTE. And so we tend to base a lot of our work here in the state, even though both grants that we're talking about in this grant season right now are not Perkins and are not federally funded. We still use these definitions. And so when we talk about special populations, these are individuals with disabilities. Individuals, when we look at the dashboard, we will see our special ed students, we'll see the students from economically disadvantaged families. We have one of the things that's interesting that we won't see in the dashboard, but to be thoughtful as you're applying for your grants, is this idea of individuals preparing for non-traditional fields. So that's where we see things like men in nursing or women in auto mechanics or in some of those spaces where they traditionally aren't seen in those fields. Those are actually considered special populations, and in some cases can be a bonus for you if you are serving those in some of these grants. The really specific single parents, like single pregnant women, homeless, out of work individuals, we have foster youth. Those who are in armed forces and active duty, that's not part of the dashboard either, but that's something that you should see in your SIS as a special population that you are planning around when you are writing these grants. And then any other barriers to educational achievement. And so that's where we can see our language learners as well as a special population that we're serving. So have these in mind as you are writing grants, as you are building programs. How are you ensuring all of these students have access to your programs and are being able to successfully move their way through your programs as well? And there's a lot of ways that you can use CTEIG and K12SWP funds to accomplish those goals. Since today we are going to spend a bunch of time in the dashboard, I'm going to start with a dashboard overview, and I'm going to drop my link in the chat here again for anyone who's joined. And so the California dashboard, this is an online tool. This is basically our report card to the public as a school system, right? So this is where you can see that little dial at the top. And you really, like, the closer you are to blue, the better you're doing. But interestingly, as you dig into the dashboard, you get different colors by student group. And so as we're looking at special populations, that can be really helpful. And then we can get into the extended areas of the dashboard to look at the data that is disaggregated by student group. And so that really helps us when we're looking at grants and we're writing our objectives and thinking about our growth to look at some of those. We know that the accountability system is a little different than we've had seen before. It used to be like 900 it's on, we'd all wear a shirt and we're all going for one number, and it somehow encapsulated everything we do. Now we have a number of different indicators, the college and career being one of 6 indicators. And they are a balance of both your current year results, which we call your status, what your current status is, and whether you improved them or got worse from last year. And so those combinations are what results in your color. And we'll look at the 5x5 grid to get a feel for that. And let me just make sure that the sound is on for this. Let's push play. This is just a quick overview.
Welcome to the California School Dashboard. Around the dashboard in 90 seconds.
The dashboard is designed to help us understand how well our schools are doing and where improvement is needed. The best place to begin is by looking up your child's school. Right away, we see a variety of useful information called measures. Together, these give us a more complete picture of what's happening at the school. Once each year, all the information on the dashboard is updated. The state then assigns a color rating for each measure. These ratings are based on 2 main things: how well the school did at a certain point in time, and whether performance went up or down. If we look at one of the academic indicators, we see that overall, students fell 62.9 points below the standards for math, although they increased 14.3 points from last year. We can also see how students performed compared to the state average. And we can view a breakdown to see how well our schools served particular groups of students. Besides schools, we can view similar data about the district as a whole. The district section includes additional information about parent involvement and school climate and conditions. The dashboard puts clear information into our hands as parents, so we can talk with teachers and school leaders and help drive our schools to success. Are you ready to take it for a spin?
You can find more information about the California School Dashboard at www.casschooldashboard.org. This video was produced for the California Department of Education by Californians dedicated to Education Foundation.
All right, so when we look at the dashboard, we're going to be diving into the CCI today, but there are 6 different measures that all come together that are state indicators, meaning that they get a color. You also have local indicators that are self-reported, and you'll find those kind of in the narrative portion of your area of the dashboard as well. So today we're going to talk about that CCI. And there are bigger explanations of each, but as far as time goes, we're going to jump straight into our CCI measures. So there's a few more pieces to this puzzle now, because just so you know, the wonderful thing about the college and career indicator is that it's really meant to be dynamic and based on the needs of students. So this was the overarching view of the indicator in recent years. They have since added, and we'll look at that later, the pre-apprenticeship and a few workability indicators around work-based learning. And there are additional indicators that are on the way. And we'll look at some of those on the back end as well. And we will dive into each of these components individually and talk about some of the strategies you can use for CTE around them. But in the meantime, I recommend that you head over to californiaschooldashboard.org. And then in the slides right here, there is a worksheet, and let's see if I can copy the link and drop it in here. It's going to force a copy of this worksheet for you. And this is a great activity to do with your team, with your CTE team, or with your counseling team. And you can kind of go through this, and we'll look at it today. And it's a good way for you to start to dig through your own data. So we'll kind of start, what color is your school, what % of your students are doing these things, and look at more details. Now, I can just pick any district, but if anyone wants me to pick your district, put your district in the chat, and I will use you as my example school today. Although charters may not have enough data in there. So let's see who's in here. Coalinga. Coalinga, what's your district? Let's see, Coalinga, you're unified. So let's see where we're at here. So if we pull up the Coalinga district and look through here, what you'll see, and I'm going to focus on district-wide data because these grant applications are applied for as a district. So if you only have one high school, then it kind of ends up being about the same. It looks like if your entire district is under 5,000 students, I'm guessing that you just have one high school there. And you'll see different indicators. Now, why aren't there a bunch of indicators right now? Because of COVID, we had some gaps in data. And so I'm going to go to 2019 by using this pull down, and that's going to give me the normal view. And this year in December, you should start seeing some of these come into play. College and career is going to take at least another year because of the way that the data is coming in. And so you can see that they were originally green back in 2019. But when we get to these additional reports, you'll get some data from this this last year and the year before, even though we don't have a dashboard color for it. So as we go through here, if we look at the Coalinga district, you get to these, we call them kind of like the baseball card, where it's an overview of each indicator. And if I go here to the college and career, I can see that even though overall I'm green, I have at least one student group in the yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and view more details, and I'm going to go in, and when I do that, it's going to jam right to that part of the dashboard for college and career. So all students are green. Here they have a smaller group, so they have their English learners are yellow. So right now, Coalinga, I would say this is a good starting point to say, okay, as we're writing our grants, if we have one student group who is not at the same level as our other student groups, that's an area where, okay, could we fund some specific training on how to support our English learners for our CTE teachers? And so find a training, find the cost, think about the cost of transportation and the cost of the cost of whatever the training is, and send your CTE teachers off to some workshops around supporting English learners. And that may help to offset this. So that would be a specific special population that you might want to serve. You also, and in green, you're doing pretty well. Now, there's no performance color over here, and this is because it's a smaller district. If you have, and if we click on the student group, roll down here, we can see the no performance color groups. It's less than 11 students in the entire district of these different groups. And so we can't see them here. However, you can run some of these reports with the CalPADS numbers that you rolled up, and you may be able to see some of this data. There's also a report you can run from the CDE, from the dashboard, to get your data out, and that could be helpful. So we can see here, though, students with disabilities, they don't have a performance color because there are less than 31. So 31 students, it's about student privacy and also accuracy. So when you have very small student groups, the change of 1 or 2 students can impact your color tremendously. So just because of that, they are not going to report on a smaller group. So here we know that we don't have a color for our student groups, but if we had a color, it would probably be red, because we're at 13% prepared. So we could also use that information to help us determine that students with disabilities would be a good group for us to write and support. So again, you could find professional development. One of the things that I'm working on, and I will also be presenting on at the CTE Fall Conference up in Rancho Mirage, is that relationship between workability and CTE. So if you have workability at your district, their entire job is to place students who are often not diploma bound because they're fairly impacted with their disability, and help them find employment. So they work with employers. They know all the accommodations that need to happen in the workplace. They are really great at identifying ways to shift a job or to make a job work for a student that as a CTE teacher who came out of industry, you might not actually know how to accommodate the student properly, and that can just make it difficult. So you might be able to fund something around your work with your workability folks in order to help them advise your CTE teachers and train them on better accommodating students with disabilities so that they can be more successful in CTE. So these are all just kind of ideas as we go along. And so as you kind of go through, right, if you go through that worksheet, you can get questions, answers to each question. Since we only have an hour today, I'm going to kind of let you do the worksheet on your own time. Again, like I just showed you, I have all of these in screenshots because last time the dashboard didn't work, but we already kind of looked at this student group information. You can see in this particular example that I have in the slide deck, they had a little different number because they have a lot more students, student groups that show up because it's a larger district. And you can see here, they have English learners, homeless, students with disabilities, and white students who are all in yellow. We have orange for foster youth. So this could also be an opportunity to really support, look at the foster youth who are in your system, make sure you know who they are, find out what are some of the barriers they have to being successful on the College and Career Indicator. Now, once we jam in here, so we've already kind of gone through this in a non-slides version, so I'm going to skip that. When we talked earlier about that status and change, this big ol' grid here is what we call the 5x5. And here, what you can see is on the left side, you'll see their current status. And so in this particular example, the status was medium across the district. So in medium status, we're right here. We have all students, socioeconomically disadvantaged and Hispanic students are all in this spot. Now, if they hadn't improved from the year before, they would have been yellow. If they got worse than the year before, they would have been orange. So whatever your status is, you also always want to be improving because it always puts you into this column that's just like one color up from the column before. You can see here that even though we have different groups in yellow, they have different status. So here I might say, wow, my English learners, my homeless youth, my students with disabilities, and my foster youth are all at the low level. So this would be a group where I would want to identify ways to impact their experiences in my CTE programs and see if I can support their success specifically. What are the barriers to their success? How can I support them? Are they being scheduled in a way where they can actually complete a pathway? The fact that they may be unhomed right now, does it mean they're changing schools and they're having a harder time getting into a sequence of courses, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can do to support folks who are down here, and using that data is very helpful when you're creating the goals. But you're like, where's this? This isn't on the dashboard. So I'm gonna go back over to the dashboard on my other tab. And if you're in your dashboard, if you're not in your dashboard right now, head over to your dashboard. At the top of your dashboard on multiple pages, there's a button that's called View Additional Reports. I'm gonna click on that. And you get into this other zone that is not the magical parent-friendly space, but has a ton of great reports. So if I want to see their college and career 5x5, notice I'm looking at reporting year 2019. And let me just open a new tab. Give you the page where you can go straight to your additional reports. Ooh, and I just got a very important question. Is this information for the district furnished by CalPads for the dashboard? Yes and no. I actually just spoke, whoops, not this one. I just spoke on CalPads, and I actually have a whole special, I created this CalPads in the California dashboard document here that can help you see what the data source is for each part. So if you're a CalPads person, Whoops, here, let me share that short link that's in here. This can be really helpful for you to see where all the information is coming from. There's a whole recording of me talking about all of this. So shoot me an email and I'll be happy to share that information with you as well. But you can see when we get into the indicators, most of your college and career is coming in through CalPads. So that's where all of your CCI data and things like that are coming in. We also see that when we're looking at assessments under CCI, like the A through G, not A through G, sorry, the AP testing and IB testing, that's data that does not come in through CalPads, that comes from the testing companies themselves. And so there's a few different places that the college and career can come from. But this is just a handy overarching CalPad stock that I put together. So since you asked about CalPads, Marianne, you get that bonus you didn't even know you were going to get by coming to this session. All right, so let's go back to our additional reports as I click on all of the links and confuse you with my navigation. Before I jump in, any questions on kind of that front-facing dashboard? I know I'm rolling quickly for time, but I'm going to make sure to give folks time to ask questions. All right, so over here in the additional reports, and I put that link in the chat, you will be able to find, if you go to reporting year 2019, that's where you're gonna get the most. We can look at our 5x5 college and career placement report, and that's where we get that 5x5. So we've got Coalinga's 5x5 here. And this is just for what schools that they have. And since they only have one high school, you only see one. But up here in this little secret link, you have to click every link you can find back here, because I'll tell you later, you're gonna be like, how did she get to that page? It's a lot of clicks. But there's a student groups 5x5, and that's what I showed you on that last page. And I think that this is a nice way to organize where you can see all students, and then we see English learners here. So it's interesting, as a district, you had a real increase for your all students, your SED and your Hispanic students, and your English learners are both low and didn't increase as much. So be curious to look at, like, what did you do to increase for all your other students? Are some of those things that you need to replicate with your English learners? If I go to like a bigger district, so let's do my old district, Sweetwater. They've got about 40,000 students and they're only secondary. So we're gonna go to the district, and I want the 20, oh, let's see, it'll let me use old reporting years. Oh, it's not giving me that pull down because of this. If I go back to the dashboard and pull them up, it will give me the better reports. So it's easier. Unfortunately, this is like, even I, who am very well versed in this, have to click like a dozen times to get anywhere, which is why this webinar is helpful, and hopefully you can follow along with my clicks. All right, so if I look at Sweetwater and I go back to 2019, I look at their 5x5 college and career placement report, I'm going to see a lot of details because they have so many students that every student group is going to be represented there. John, so here's each of their schools, so I can see which schools are, you know, needing different things. I know that Palomar High is their continuation school, and so that's going to be a population that's hard to get out of the red and the orange. And then Olympian is one of their newer schools up here, and man, they are really rocking it. Good old Eastlake High, that's where I taught for many years, but I am not really as focused on the schools themselves, but more on our populations. So I can click here and I can see, you know, luckily nobody is doing worse, although actually even in their very high, for whatever reason, their Asian population had a lower number on the CCI. So here we can see that perhaps foster youth, English learners, homeless, and students with disabilities would be a good focus area for their grant. Now you're like, but the CCI incorporates a million different things. So let's go back to the report, and instead of picking the 5x5, down below is the college career measures report. We're going to look at this in 2019, 2020, and 2021 because they all read out for different data because of the because of COVID, right? Because a lot of this data didn't happen because some of it depends on how they do on their testing, right? So if I go through here, I can see that the cohort is going to represent your graduating seniors. Okay. So here, our graduating seniors for Sweetwater is over 7,000 students in their whole district because it's a giant district. So we've got 7,000 seniors, and we can say of the students here, 47%, 47.7 were prepared, 15 were approaching or prepared, and 37% were not prepared at all. And all of these zones are helpful to see. We're going to look at each zone. So if we look up here at, these are all, the first set of data is about prepared students. And you'll see here's the legend. And you see all these categories, and that's going to really help you identify the students who, the student groups that you want to work with. So if I open this up a little bit bigger, I can see right here at the top is CTE pathway completion. First things first, where are they getting most of their prepared from? You can see it's A through G completion, because look at this nice dark band where the darker it is, the more students have accomplished that. So they've got a lot of A through G. They've got a good amount of AP. The Smarter Balance assessment, the statewide assessment, they're doing all right on. But look at this light color up here for CTE pathway completion. As a district, they had 542 students from the prepared category who were pathway completers. Now I can go and say none of them were American Indian. Only 10 out of 542 were students with disabilities. That's like 2%. I know they have more than 2% students with disabilities. So you want your category to match how many students are being successful there. I know they have a good amount of foster students, but only one was both a pathway completer and marked as prepared. And I like to think of it, it's like the you pick two menu at Panera, right? You, for the most part, two of these things, some combination of two are going to get them to that prepared mark. And so as we look at this, we can see that pathways, they could probably boost. This district is literally on the edge of Mexico, and only 37 language learners were pathway completers and did this. So Joe, this is in our thank you for asking. If you're getting lost, on your dashboard, view additional reports. And then I'm looking at the 2019 because it has more data. And we're going to go down to the College and Career Measures report. And that's what I'm looking at right now for Sweetwater. And we can kind of see that. So we have the top part that's prepared. Then you scroll down a little bit and you get to approaching prepared. Now this is interesting. I like this one a lot. So Sweetwater had 166 students who completed a CTE pathway, but they didn't do another thing, right? So if we just got them A through G completed, or supported them on the SBAC, or maybe they had a college credit course, that would have boosted them up into the ability to be prepared. And so right here too, look at, there were 37 students with disabilities who did complete a pathway, right? Up at the top, prepared, they only had 10. So a lot of their students with disabilities completing a pathway aren't completing something else. All right. So these are some of the other things that you can look at where, okay, so they had 7 homeless students complete a pathway, but they didn't meet their A through G or didn't do their SBAC. For those kinds of things, you can also work on, are you working with counselors on making sure that our pathway students are also taking the A through G courses. In Sweetwater, I know that they changed the ruling so that all students are supposed to have an A through G diploma. But if they don't have that C or better, then it doesn't count as A through G, right? So maybe we need more students supported to get A through G to do this, or more college credit options. If I scroll down here, I can look at my not prepared students. So do these numbers match my overall numbers of students? Okay, now Sweetwater is mostly, there's a lot of Hispanic and Filipino students in Sweetwater, but look how there's 85% of the students who are not prepared are Hispanic. Maybe we need to boost that for Filipino and not boost, because we actually want these numbers to be less. But we want to really maybe focus in on our Hispanic students, because there are a lot of students who are not prepared. How are we making sure they're scheduled in pathways and A through G and all of those things? So you can really see a lot of data here. The problem is we haven't collected all of that data all the years. So let's look at what we can see in the year 2020. So if you go up to the top of your report, I'm hoping that you kind of got it on another side here. And you're following it. So if I go over to the 2020 report, it looks very similar. But what it will, because also our 2020 students, they took the SBAC in 2019. So even though they graduated in the heart of the pandemic, they took the tests because it was tested in junior year. So there's still a lot of data for our students who graduated in 2020. But look here, we have spaces for a whole bunch of programs that were added. So in this case, Sweetwater had a non-registered pre-apprenticeship. Now I've seen other districts where they accidentally put numbers here, not really knowing, because these are new projects. So this is also a good time to double check. Is this consistent? Based on the fact that there's 28 in leadership military science, I'm gonna guess, I'm pretty sure that I know Olympian High School has an ROTC program, whichever school has that. Those students are here. So you can kind of see where they have programs. But down here, you might start going, oh, I need to make sure that I have systems in place to capture the information. So one of the things you can even invest in is like working with your folks who are with your SIS and your DAS, and how are you capturing work-based learning information in order to make sure that you're hitting the right demographic. So that could be a project that you want to work on with your grant funds, is just making sure that you have systems to capture that information. So these are the 2020 numbers. And again, here's our approaching prepared. You scroll down and you get to see this guy. And again, we have a bunch of pathway completers that didn't get any of the other metrics and things like that. All right, let's look at 2021 has the least information because we did not get a color in 2021. So the way that they did the report here, it's just the data. It's not going to tell you whether they're prepared or not prepared, because they didn't have the smarter balanced test results. And those are not rolled up in CalPads. Those are rolled in separately. And so if we look here, we can see each one. So here's the number of students. They had almost 7,000 students. Here's the AP exams, how they did on that. IB, we down here completed at least one CTE pathway. So they're pathway completers. So here we can go through and say, wow, only one student in their whole district that's a foster student completed a CTE pathway, only 5 homeless students. So who are the people at the district level supporting foster and homeless youth? How do you work with them to identify better ways to serve these students so that they may be more likely to complete? A lot of times they're moving around. So our 300 hours becomes a barrier for students who are in some of the categories like foster and homeless youth. And so that could be an opportunity to do that. So these are live data from your last, these are 2021 graduates. You should get a similar report this December for your 2022 graduates. You likely, or I mean, not likely, I know you already turned in your CalPads data. So you could pull your 2022 CalPads data and look at a report on your pathway completers. All right, and find out who isn't completing, and you'll be able to kind of predict where you'll be on future versions of the dashboard. All right, so we also see A through G, and then here's interesting. So completed A through G and at least one pathway. They have that. So now we can say there's 211 students who would have been prepared because of pathway and A through G together. And that's where you start really making really nice, what do you call that? Like a program of study. And I know Joe's on here, Poway has great programs of study. And it's basically, here's the suggested schedule we have for a student to complete both A through G and CTE requirements so that we always graduate them prepared based on the schedule that we've given them. And then we're going to make sure that there's good support for all of the students for taking tests, opportunities for college credit and all of those things. But these go together really nicely. A lot of times college credit courses are also interacting with CTE, but there's more, if it's dual enrollment, great. If it is articulation, it's not really supposed to be counted. Now, some districts have figured out if you transcript articulated credit and transfer it back to the high school, it can sometimes work in the college credit zone. But there's some mixed reviews on that, and it's a loophole that might be closed. So you don't necessarily want to plan around articulation. That was looked at by the Board of Ed, and they decided not to support it, mostly because articulated classes traditionally, only a few % of students actually claim the credit. So that's a place that we could improve our work as well. And then state seal of biliteracy. So these are the extended reports that I recommend that you explore. And so let me jump in. So we already looked at a lot of these. The 2021 data is available. These are just slides that replicate what I just did with you, and it might be helpful for you to find everything again. You might have seen this before, but we keep getting more and more criteria. SDCOE has kind of this little structure on how we like to help people see what it means to be prepared. The work-based learning measures haven't been added, but like I said, if you've ever been to Panera, which is like, you know, the breakfasty shop of coffees and pastries, they have a menu called You Pick Two. And it's like, oh, do you want a soup and a salad? Do you want a half of a sandwich and a soup, or a macaroni and cheese and a, you know, a salad, or whatever the different mixtures is. And so when we look at the CCI, we also see it kind of like a You Pick Two. So you either are 2 Smarter Balance or 2 AP or 2 IB or 2 college credit courses, right? State seal and leadership, they have really specific combos. When it comes to CTE pathway completion, the You Pick Two is either you've completed a pathway and you did well on the Smarter Balance assessment, or you did well on a pathway and you completed a college credit course, or you'll see hiding down here, you met your A through G and you passed the CTE pathway. So let's look at all of these, because there are actually some strategies you can use no matter which area of the dashboard you're looking at to support your CTE students. So when we're looking at Smarter Balance, a CTE related strategy you could consider incorporating into your grants or providing professional learning to embed more literacy and mathematical practices in your CTE, or consider linked learning models and how you are really connecting their CTE learning to core academic learning, building their ability to do grade level math in that class. And that's one of the things, right? We might say like, oh, we do all kinds of math all the time, right? How do you help a high school student link the math that they're doing in a building and construction trades class where they're making blueprints and looking at blueprints and making really specific measurements? And there's a ton of mathematical thinking involved in building construction trades. How might we talk to our teachers in the math department to really build an understanding of the mathematical concepts that the students at that grade level need to hit? Something else you could think of is when I used to teach chemistry. I taught medical chemistry for many years, and the district or the school says, hey, we're going to be doing literacy practices across everyone. Here is an annotation guide that you can use when students are reading in your class. And I looked at the annotation guide and I was like, well, I like this whole idea of pre-reading, first reading, second reading, and reflection when we go through. But the questions on here are like about novels. And as a science teacher, I'm bringing them like journal articles or maybe a pre-lab assignment or something like that. So I took those same processes that they're using in their English class, and I rewrote that annotation guide to really be thoughtful about like, what kinds of images do you see in here? Are there graphs? What do you think the graphs are telling you about the reading that you're doing? and helping them interact with a more scientific text, but using the same approach that they see in their English class. And so when you align the things that they're doing in CTE with the things that they're doing to really be successful in literacy, which the state likes to measure through smarter, balanced, summative assessment, it can boost your students' ability to be successful in those places. So these are some of the things you could consider integrated. With AP and IB, we know that AP Computer Science is part of the family of CTE. Last year, they changed some of the legislation, and so be really careful and conscientious when you're applying this year to see where you may have CTE aligned AP and IB programs that you might be able to fund with the CTE incentive grant for the first time. Because there was that shift in language in the legislation last year. That is a new opportunity when you are looking at this year's application. College credit. You need a grade of C- or better for 2 semesters or 3 quarters, or if you have a CTE completer, they just need 1 college credit. This means you could consider, focusing on dual enrollment. If you are thinking about like a 3-course CTE sequence, one thing I like to say is start with a concentrator and then have a capstone and then have a dual enrollment class. Your kids don't realize that the dual enrollment classes is totally different code in our computers, but we as educators know, wow, now I have a 3-year sequence. After year 2, they're a completer. After year 3, they get a college credit class. And now I've created a really strong and robust, rigorous opportunity for students to get to a new level in CTE, and you also are designing it to hit the state indicators as well. State seal of biliteracy. Again, this is an opportunity to support your language learners. Like I talked about earlier, you could fund professional development for your CTE teachers. You could also look at how do you make sure that they're provided with any bilingual materials? And so if you need your books to be in Spanish or Tagalog or whatever it is, are there online adoptions that they could use to have resources that are in multiple languages to support the language learners in your class? Maybe it's as simple as having a dictionary. If they're using a language dictionary constantly through their classes for their tests, they are sometimes allotted the ability to use that on other tests as well. And so even when I taught classes that had a lot of language learners in them, I would sometimes look through my test and look at all of the hardest words and just provide a little sheet of paper that translated each of the hardest words into the language that is most common in my class. And that was something that just said, I understand this is a challenge. So how do you train your teachers to do some more of these pieces? A side note, so I have a question in the chat about 2 sequenced pathway, and the capstone is dual enrollment. So what's supposed to be happening is that a dual enrollment class is not considered a CTE class when you enter it, right? So you have your CTE concentrator class, you CTE capstone class. And then I call it a false capstone to then put a dual enrollment class on top. But to have a CTE sequence, it needs to be taught by a CTE instructor. It's supposed to be 2 high school classes with those CalPADS codes that are in the same pathway that are concentrator and capstone. And so the dual enrollment is not supposed to count as a CTE capstone, but instead it might count for your college credit class. So they get 1 brownie point, but they don't double dip. They've been really specific about not double dipping when it comes to CTE and dual enrollment in the same program. Whether you found some kind of loophole, oh yeah, you can make an intro class, but it doesn't count towards your 300 hours. So I mostly advise folks to start at concentrator and then consider doing 2 capstones if you want to have students to go through, because otherwise you get students who drop off by the 3rd class. And if they don't do a concentrator and a capstone, then they're not considered a completer. So can you have a CTE? Yes. So your CTE classes are articulated, but articulated classes don't count for college credit. So like that's just its own side thing, which is great for our students. I believe some of our districts have figured out that if you do get the kids to go to the college, claim the credit, get the credit on the transcript, and then transfer it back, and then you put them in their high school transcript as a college credit class, it's kind of a loophole that hasn't been closed yet. But articulated classes get college credit, but unless they have claimed that credit, they do not count for the college credit on the indicator because they haven't claimed the credit. It's possible that even claiming on articulated credit could somehow be loopholed out, but just calling it an articulated class will not give it college credit. That student themselves has to go to the college, claim the credit, right? You can't even just put it in CATMA. They need to claim it and have it transcripted, and then they can transfer it back to the high school. So that kind of makes sense. So that's definitely been a very big point of confusion through all of this, is that concept of like, where does articulation fit in? I was watching it as it was going through the process, and then the board said no. And so articulation is not currently part of the indicator. Yeah, it's all, at the end of the day, hopefully that is not making a huge difference in yours because you have enough other things going on. All right, state seal of biliteracy, again, building the capacity in CTE teachers to support language learners. This is something that's really specific. Your district may or may not offer the seal of biliteracy, and there are certain different qualifications that students need to make. They have to demonstrate their proficiency in speaking, reading, and writing in other languages. So if you are supporting them in your class to have strong, like maybe they can do a presentation in their language of choice, and maybe that gives them an opportunity to build their proficiency. And so you can think about, if this is a big piece of your puzzle, offering biliteracy opportunities in CTE. There's a little bit more detail here on the slide deck if you want more information about seal of biliteracy. Military leadership science, there's some random movements to try to pull them in under the CTE umbrella. For now, they stand alone over here. And that's part of the JROTC programs, and they have to have 2 years of that and 3 or higher. So it's kind of like an alternative version of CTE that isn't under our umbrella, although some of you might support military and JROTC leadership science at your district. It's not necessarily tied in with CTE. And these are the particular requirements of leadership science. Now, obviously, CTE pathway completion is what we're looking for. To complete a CTE pathway, it is a 300-hour pathway. It has to have a concentrator course and a capstone course. They need a C- or better. They also need the Smarter Balanced college credit, or A through G, in their you pick 2 of pathway completion. So when you're really thinking about supporting a pathway completer, I think I have a whole slide on this. Here are some of the areas of impact you could write into your grant. Improving course sequencing, looking at reporting errors, recruitment into your program. Recruitment is huge, because what you're going to do is you're going to look at your numbers and you're say, who am I not serving enough? And then you're going to identify strategies to push in at the middle school or 9th grade level to particularly help students who aren't necessarily currently in your program have more of a chance to come into your program. So this could even be things like, I'll walk into an auto shop or engineering program and it is all boys, right? So how are you really looking to recruit females into that program? You could bring in more women industry speakers, bring a woman industry speaker into your middle school where you're recruiting. And so that girls see a role model there. Bring in a few of your students who are in that class and really try to identify, maybe it's a student with disabilities or a student from a student population that isn't well represented. Don't make it obvious, but like have a diverse panel of students who other students are seeing that may help them see that. I've seen a lot of women in STEM panels that we've had at some of our district, or opportunities to just engage students in a meaningful way. And remember, those initiatives aren't only like a woman in STEM initiative, not just for women. We want our boys and those of non-genders to see like women or those who are ungendered like in positions in industry, so that they are now respected by everyone instead of really looking at them as a outlier when it comes to certain industry areas. We also can look at retention. So if you're looking at your numbers, like you might be surprised, you might be looking at your dashboard right now going like, wow, we have like 6 CTE programs. So we should have at least, 150 or 200 completers. What's happening? Sometimes you have all these intro to photography classes. And guess what? That doesn't count for anything at all whatsoever. It just uses your CTE money. And so, yes, so I see someone sharing a new document, and I have that linked here as well. So you'll see these documents linked in here. I'll show you where those are. And I'm going to be giving them some feedback on the fact that they split college and career readiness separately, because we've fought for many years to say that what we do is preparing students for both college and career. They'll get that. So we know A through G requirements. Here's again an opportunity to prioritize and have them all A through G approved. So let's look at work-based learning. And I've been working a lot with the state on some of these. We know these are currently on the CCI. There's a whole big website that's been worked on with a lot of FAQs on it. So if you haven't seen the website, let me just show you. If you kind of look here, it's going to go through what is a pre-apprenticeship, what are the state and federal jobs programs, what is that transition work experience. So you scroll all the way down here. Now we see the potential new measures, right? The internships, student-led enterprise, simulated work-based learning, and ASVAB. And there's details about each one of those. And this all got updated in the last 6 months. And as you get all the way down to the bottom, oh good, they updated that flash. We have a FAQ section that was added. And so that might be helpful for you as well. They released a flash 204 in July of this year. Nope, that's the ASVAB flash. Oh, where's the new flash? It was a flash 2. Oh, this is the old flash. I told them to update. They haven't made this updated. Oh, here we go. It's updated to flash 229. Sorry for all the clicks. But if you are looking for how to report on this data, they did release this flash this year. So you can see where it's updated and some information. Like originally they talked about internships being able to just kind of be a free-for-all. But now the legal team at the CTE has indicated that it does need to be attached to a specific course, must tie internships to a course and instructor. So that is something that if you are building internships, I think this is something that's really helpful. And I'll drop that flash update in the chat for those of you who are in the CalPADS part. So these are the upcoming areas. I feel like there's a lot of support for internships to be included. I'm not sure. Student-led enterprise, simulated work-based learning, these are really just high quality CTE. And so we'll see if those get approved by the board or if it's really just internships. I don't really know what the support or not on ASVAB is, but as you're building these pieces out, you can think about if there are projects that you want to do to align to the new work-based learning reports, because there's whole sections on work-based learning in both CalPAD or CTEIG and K12SWP. So let's briefly, you might want to come back and refer to these, but I have pulled a screenshot of everywhere these appear in your RFAs. But I know it's almost noon, but I'll just kind of plug on through and maybe go over a little bit. So apologies if you have to cut out at noon. But we know in minimum eligibility standard 3A, so in CTEIG, the priorities of CTEIG, they're all over there in the self-study, right? So when you go into your high quality CTE evaluation doc, this is what we want to see. So there's 2 areas. There's standard 3 and standard 10, I think it is. So standard 3 does say, talk about specialized specific counseling services, data on program effectiveness for special population is there. Oh, great. That's a really good question, Christy, because that has not been determined. I'm in those discussions at the state. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to analyze all the data you guys put in and find the cut point that makes the most sense, right? So we don't want to say like it has to be exactly 50 hours or whatever it is, but maybe it'll be more than 50 hours, maybe it'll be more than 80 hours, maybe it'll be more than 40 hours. So what we want to do is we want to see everything you guys put in to CalPADS, run that report, use that for the CCI. There's like a CCI task force that I've been told that they're going to add me to, but we haven't had a meeting yet. So I'll try to bring you all the info as it comes. But there is not currently a cut point for what a internship hours has to be. So free for all at the moment. All right, so round 8. Oops, sorry, these are all hyperlinked to that part of the doc also, so feel free to click on that and get to where it is. Oops, so round 8 also, here's eligibility standard 10, provides opportunities for pupils who are individuals with exceptional needs to participate in all programs. So right here, this is another place in the self-study that you'll see has to do with our students with special needs, our special populations, and ensuring that they have equity and access and support that they need. Round 5, basically the same exact stuff they had last year in both cases. I just updated some page numbers here for you if you're looking for it. So we're looking at closing equity gaps is a lot of the language used in strong workforce, round 5. And so you can kind of see that these are also positive considerations that can increase your chances of getting more points for this program. Again, here's the rubric language. So the statement provides clear and documented database evidence from demographic, enrollment, and completion data that substantiates the targeted student population to be served. We just looked at data that you can use for this, right? You can pull that demographic data, enrollment, well, and completion data straight out of the dashboard or out of the CalPADS report that you rolled up to the dashboard, right? So the data we looked at may be helpful when you're in that area. Here again, project objectives clearly describe the effort to close equity gaps and include activities designed to improve outreach and increase targeted academic supports. So again, when we're talking about SWP, you really want to be thoughtful about how am I closing equity gaps? I saw gaps in my dashboard. I pulled my dashboard. I said, wow, this percent of my students are prepared, but only 3 of them are students with disabilities. I've got to close that gap. Only 4 of them are my African-American students. I need to close that gap. My Hispanic students don't meet the same as everyone. Let's close that gap. So those are some of the ways that you can really be thoughtful about this work. And so again, this is part of equity, the scoring with special populations. And so interestingly enough, here's the maximum points for this is 20, and you can see that special populations, oh, I think I've circled it. Nope, I didn't circle it. We can see here, number 3, does it serve pupil subgroups that have higher than average dropout rate? Does it serve unduplicated pupils and English learners and foster youth? Number 4, so there's some positive considerations here. Yes, and I will respond. I'll send everyone who's on this call a copy of the recording for those of you who have to hop off. This here, when we look at the pathway work plan, now, interestingly enough, one of the changes this year is instead of one giant score for your entire work plan, they actually created scoring by section. So if you were looking at your work plan, 7 to 9 points of your overall 35 points, that's a big chunk, is focused. Description includes activities designed to intentionally improve outreach and increase targeted academic supports, such as tutoring, mentoring, and work-based learning, all right? So that specific outreach is really important. And we can see here when we're scoring on page 9 of the rubric that you are looking at traditionally underserved and underrepresented pupils and pupils with higher than average dropout rates. So when you're looking at the RFA and you're doing your application, you also need to pull up that rubric right next to it and make sure that you are looking at both because then you know what the scores mean and what you need to write. You need to write to the rubric because your scores are going to look at the rubric. Not bad, 12:02. All right. That's exactly 1 hour from when I began. So I did keep to my 1 hour. I think next year I better make it a little bit longer because this it's just such a deep dive. And unfortunately, the dashboard, it really, you get out of it the time you put into it. So if you're somebody like me who literally has clicked everything, and even this year when I was preparing something, I found a new click. Like I was like, wait, what's this piece of information? So the dashboard is changing, and also the depth of different information in there is kind of unending. So sorry, that was like a real fast overarching go. Again, let me, this link to the presentation is here. And then I do encourage you to continue to join us for our grant season of 2022. We are somewhere here in the middle. So there's already recordings. So like last week, Leslie and I did the intro to CTE. The recording is posted. The self-evaluation, there were, and the labor market information, they had previous recordings. And so those Q&A sessions already happened. On Thursday, I did a presentation on the project plan, and there's a recording here. We already had our first application preparation workshop focused on CTEIG. There's another one in person for K12SWP later on. And as you look through next week, I encourage you, or September, oh, it looks like we already had Sally's session on your match on the 1st. So we'll make sure that we get that link up as soon as we can. So yes, so this doc is also here at the end. So let me copy the link. And you can see on it too, I know a lot of you are from out of county. What we did is we said local versus broad audience. Some of these are like our own labor market information and probably isn't as helpful for you. But a session like this on the CCI is good for anyone. So you can kind of see what we've got in the local versus broad. Hopefully, if you are a local leader, I'll see you tomorrow at our in-person CTE Leaders Network kickoff. So with that, I am going to end the recording, but I'll stick around to answer any questions since I just talked at you for over an hour straight. So thank you everyone for joining, and I will stop the recording now.